Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to provide a trigger and content warning. On Smart Talks, we often discuss sensitive and potentially distressing topics, including sexual violence, trauma, and abuse. We understand that these conversations can be challenging and may bring up difficult emotions for some of our listeners. Our full content warning pertaining to today's episode can be found in the show notes. If at any point in time during this episode you feel overwhelmed, we encourage you to take care of yourself, whether that means pausing the episode, seeking support from a trusted person, or accessing resources. Your well-being is our priority. If you or someone you know needs help, you can visit elizabethsmartfoundation.org for a list of resources, or contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. Thank you for joining us today. Now let's begin.
Today's guest on Smart Talks is attorney and survivor Taryn Evans. She shares her powerful journey as a survivor of sexual assault and her experiences navigating the criminal justice system as an attorney. She discusses her background in family law, the challenges she faced after her assault, and the importance of advocacy and awareness in supporting victims. Taryn emphasizes the need for systemic change and alternative avenues for justice, while also providing insights into the emotional and psychological impacts of her experience.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Smart Talks. Today we are speaking with Taryn Evans, who is an incredible woman. She's an incredible survivor. She's an incredible attorney. Anyway, just to dive right in, we're going to begin with our rapid fire questions. And my first question is, who is your celebrity crush?
Oh, that's easy. Matthew Good.
Okay. For this or that, we'll do, would you rather watch an action film or a chick flick?
Oh, a chick flick.
What is your go-to pastime?
My go-to, I have a few. I like to do puzzles, which is kind of nerdy.
No, I like puzzles.
Yeah, that's not nerdy. That's awesome.
I do that on vacation.
Okay. Would you rather go hiking or biking?
It's dangerous trying to put me on a bike, so I'd have to.
Okay, and final question. Do you prefer Coke or Pepsi? Or Dr. Pepper?
So I sadly had to give up my Coke, but it would definitely be Diet Coke. Like when you went somewhere and they had Pepsi, it was like, oh my gosh, do you have limes? Like, very loyal Diet Coke fan before I stopped drinking soda.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, no,
Making
way
a
to be
healthy choice.
healthy.
Yeah.
That's right. All right. Well, just diving in, do you mind beginning by sharing a little bit about yourself with our listeners?
Sure. So I'm an attorney. I have my own firm now, and I specialize in family law. I used to do a bunch of litigation involving corporate disputes where they just fought about money. And I found that I was more passionate about helping people, and specifically, there's a lot of kind of domestic violence and protective order work that I felt was really important and kind of drew me into the family law area. And I grew up in Salt Lake, so still live very close to where I grew up. And I was widowed when I was young, but I'm remarried. I have two amazing stepsons that are adults, so they're kind of just my friends. They don't call me their stepmom. I have two Yorkies. They're my fur babies. Peach is 12 and she's hanging in there, and Mr. Fox is 8. So they're my fur babies, and they really are like my emotional support through everything that I've gone through. I have a big family. I have 5 siblings, and I'm lucky they all kind of live local. And my husband has a big family too, and most of them live local. So have pretty close family. And I kind of stay close to home, and I work locally. I work around the state, but most of my work is in, the counties really close to Salt Lake. So kind of stayed local, and family's local. And
Can you, to the extent that you feel comfortable, kind of share your story that's just a part of you, but as a survivor as well, so that everyone can kind of hear a little bit about what you went through and how what I have taken a lot from your story is how that's influenced you as an attorney. So I'd love for them to just be able to, like I said, whatever level of detail you're comfortable with sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I had mentioned, I was widowed when I was 28, and I I initially thought I wouldn't date again, but I started dating, and a few months into dating, I met a man on the Bumble app, and it was really innocent. We talked, and then we started texting each other, and I agreed one night to go get hot chocolate with him. And I had all these rules of, someone had to know where I was meeting someone. It was meet in public. And he was really persistent that he had been raised right. He needed to pick me up at my house because that's what a gentleman would do. And, I eventually caved because I felt like I was, being rude if I said, no, no, like, I don't, basically it was like I was implying he was a bad person if I wouldn't let him pick me up, is what he was saying.
Mhm.
And so um, he got my address because he made me feel like it was rude if I didn't let him pick me up. And then once he got to my house, he texted me and he was like, or I can't remember if it was a text or a call, but he was like, "Oh, I'm here." And so I came outside and I was planning to leave, but he was like, "Wait, I've heard about your dogs. Can I meet your adorable little Yorkies?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, of course, sure." And so I, let him meet my dogs. And then it was, "Oh, I'm really thirsty. Can I have a glass of water?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." And he's like, "Can I just have a little tour of your house?" And I was like, okay, and then, as I thought we were, walking to my living room to leave, he just sat down on my couch. And I was in this weird spot of, wait, we're supposed to be getting hot chocolate. How did this change? And, um, the minute I met him, I knew I wasn't attracted to him. He, he smelled like mildew. And so the second I was close enough to smell him, there was just no attraction. And I was in this like, okay, well, like I could be a nice friend, but I know I'm not romantically attached or attracted to him. So there was no interest on my end in anything other than like be nice. Maybe this guy could be a friend, but definitely did not want to date him. And so he sat down on my couch. I went on the as far as I could on the other side of the couch, and we talked, and it was friendly conversation. And um, but then at one point he pulled out a concealed carry permit, and it had a different name on it, and I was like, wait, what? That's not your name. And things started getting kind of weird after that point, because then he made it clear that he did, like, knew a lot about me. And a lot of it's public because I'm an attorney, and so like I have a bio. You can look up where I went to law school and things like that. But my social media wasn't public. But he must have done some digging, because yeah, there's an obituary online, but um, it's not like super easy, because you have to like know my maiden name, and because it's listed as listed as like Taryn Nicolaitis has survived Stephen Evans. And but then he said things like, "Oh, I actually went to law school with you, but dropped out of the first date." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird." And then he started saying that he had government contracts, he had connections in the government, he used burner phones so nobody can find him when he does stuff. And it just kind of got really, really bizarre. And I started to
Mhm.
just feel really uncomfortable. And I wanted him to leave, because I didn't know who this person was. He was saying weird things that you don't normally say, made me feel like he knew things about me that wouldn't be normal for a first date. To go get hot chocolate. And when I, kind of brought up getting hot chocolate, it was just shot down. And um, and then I felt really relieved, because at one point he just stood up and he walked towards my front door, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, finally he's leaving." Um, but then he turned off the lights, and that's the moment that everything changed. He turned off the lights. He walked over and he turned off my lamp light that was in the kind of the corner of the room where he was sitting on the couch. And then that's when the assault started. He walked over, he grabbed my arms, kind of held them like if he was in front of me, and like, tight together, if they, you know, so that I couldn't separate my hands, pulled me in, forced a kiss. And I was like, what are you doing? And then from there, he'd had a tour of my house. So he, pulled me, into my bedroom. I had to move a dog gate, and he pulled me into my bedroom. He forcefully, undressed me. He undressed himself. And, I said, I don't want to do this. This is way too soon. What are you doing? He completely ignored what I said. He undresses himself and he's like, this is all of me. And, and he seemed very bothered that I wouldn't look down at him. He like had his manhood. And I just kept saying, maybe if I knew you better, maybe if we went on another date, just trying to rationalize with him of like trying to get out of the situation. And I just kept saying no. And, when we're fully undressed, he then, pushes me back onto the bed. And then he pins me down, and then he starts saying, well, you have to say yes because I'm not a rapist. But he doesn't just say it. He starts like yelling it at me. And I just keep saying, I no, I don't want to. This is too soon for me. I don't know you. I don't want to do this. No in every way I could, and no in polite ways, no in the strong ways, no in hey, maybe if we see each other again, just every way I could think of, to just try to convince him that let's not do this now, but like maybe there's a chance. Maybe if we had a second date. And he didn't care what I said. The next thing he did that was really, is I was terrified, of course, because he had me pinned down. I couldn't move. He definitely could overpower me strength wise. He then, and it's pretty graphic, but he said, well, I don't need consent to knock on the door. And at that point, he started tapping his genitalia on mine. Um, and and then eventually, he just, even though I wouldn't say yes, because he's not, like, yes, I'm not a rapist, he just proceeded to, full on, raping me, in any way he wanted to. And um, I at that point, I did I did stop kind of talking. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know that I fully like disassociated or felt like I left my body or anything. I just
Mhm.
remember that he kept wanting me to look him in the face, and I wouldn't. I was kind of looking more towards the ceiling, and so what I really got a good look at was kind of his forehead and his eyebrows, which ironically now eyebrows can be a huge trigger for me, which has been a problem in the airplanes. Ironically, I mean, it's bizarre, but so he did that. And as the assault went on, because it felt like it was going so long, that I started saying like, you know aren't you done? And he was like, no, I won't until I make you feel good. So then I, and like, oh, I already orgasmed 2 times. Nobody's ever done that. I'm like, whatever I need to say to get this man to leave. Um, and then I was like, and aren't you done? And he's like, no, I'm Latino. I can go all night long. And so my fear level of this is never going to end. Like, he's just not going to stop. And then, eventually he was like, okay, I'm going to give you a gift. And I was like, I don't, like, I gave no response. And then he, ejaculated in me, but then he also got it all over me. And that was the gift. And,
Oh my God.
I just was in complete, shock.
Yeah.
He then like kind of tried to cuddle me and told me I was a warrior princess. My body was beautiful. I, should feel beautiful, and that, you know, not listen to anyone who made me feel otherwise, and just like this warrior princess. And I just was like, just shaking, and not saying anything. I didn't know if he was just like not going to leave. He was laying there, holding me tight, like I wanted to cuddle with him. He then did stand up, and then I stood up, and I just like was searching. I'm like, where's a shirt? Like, where's my shirt? I want my clothes on. I want something. And I had, his semen like dripping off me. And I was just like, I want this off me. Like, but I wanted him to leave, so I found a shirt and I just kind of like held it. And he looked at me and he's like, and I think it was I can't remember what day of the week it was, but I think it might have been a Tuesday. And he's like, I'll see you Tuesday. So the next week is the way I interpreted it. So I was like, he's going to come back. And he, because he said that. And then he walked out and left my house. And so when I heard the door shut, sprinted, locked the door. And then I took, tissue, wiped everything off me. And then I took everything he had touched, including the glass. It was an old spaghetti factory glass from when you get like an Italian soda that he drank. And I took it and I just threw it all in my basement. And then I just felt like I was ruined. I was dirty. What he had done to me, like I was ruined. Like, how could you ever clean that off of you? The mildew smell and just like what he had done to me. Like it felt so horrible. And I just was like, I'm ruined. That like nobody will want to be around me. Nobody would want to date me. Like that's out of the question. But like, would my family even want to be around me? Like I'm this dirty, ruined thing. And so, I took a bath. I don't know if you can call it a bath because I got a pumice stone and like just clean myself with a rough pumice stone, like that was used to like exfoliate like your feet, not your body. And that didn't make me feel clean. And so, I then texted someone that was not exclusively dating, and that was the first person I reported to. And they were upset that I had even agreed to go get hot chocolate with this person. And I don't remember what they said, but it was horrible. And I got that response, and it reinforced that I was ruined. I was just totally ruined and disgusting and dirty, and there was no way to fix it. And so I went to the darkest of dark places and thought my only option was to kill myself. For I don't know why, but I did have the thought, like, call a suicide hotline. And I'm very grateful that thought came to me. I was connected to someone. I mentioned that I had been raped and that I was, really struggling. I was alone, other than my dogs. I didn't feel safe. This person, with the things he said about his connections to government and these burner phones and these weird things, lying about his name. They connected me with the Rape Recovery Center, and I talked to someone, and they said, they talked to me and just made sure, talk to me, calm me down, and they said, well, do you want to report? And I mean, this is so early on, and I didn't really know what to do, but I felt encouraged that whether or not you want to report, you should go to the hospital, and we'll have an advocate there. And so I did. I called. I couldn't get a hold of my mom, but I did get a hold of my sister that has had a lot of friends go through similar things. And she took me to the hospital, and an advocate was waiting there for me. An officer was waiting. And but that advocate was amazing, moving my family out of the room when I didn't want them there, whatever I wanted. And and at that time I did decide to do the report. I did do the SANE exam. So that was the rape, and then I did go through the criminal justice system. It was a 4.5-year process. I was in Salt Lake County. I'm now on my 12th prosecutor because we haven't done the restitution hearing. I had my trial rescheduled several times. Hearings continued. I had a hearing where the prosecutor didn't show up to the hearing, so the trial was continued or canceled. The district attorney accepted a plea deal over my objection that took the 3 first-degree felony charges down to 3 Class A sexual battery charges. So my rapist gets 3 years of private probation, had to do 20 hours of community service, had a $7,500 fine, had to do 1 class. It was a couple hours, and I have a lifetime protective order, but they're not on the registry. I'm not positive whether the DNA. I've heard mixed things, whether if you have a Class A misdemeanor, whether or not your DNA goes into CODIS. I'm trying to figure out whether or not the Class A offense makes it go to CODIS or not. But yeah, I mean, he didn't have any real consequence. So that deal, they did it over my objection, and I pursued it because I wanted other women to be safe. And there's nothing out there to warn other women other than what I've gone public with. And it was a hard decision to go public. One of my main mentors at a big law firm I started at in my first 10 years of practicing told me that if I went public, it would ruin my law career. That I was a lawyer and I should have been smart enough to not get raped.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think you are so brave, like Elizabeth said, to share all of that and to share the experiences that you've had, how you felt, and what the criminal justice system was like for you in your instance. And I just want to say too, another thing that we talk about when it comes to sexual assault, you are such a great example because you are educated, you are smart, you knew the red flags, you knew what to look for, and you did so many of the right things. And I just want to say that out loud because I think so often, not only with the disbelief of survivors, but also what did you do to welcome this, or what wrong steps did you make that made the perpetrator able to abuse you in that way? The answer is it's never your fault. It doesn't matter what you do, how you protect yourself, the things that you know, how educated you are, the fact that you're an attorney, like Elizabeth was saying. None of that matters because it's the perpetrator, it's the abuser doing the manipulation that's preying on people, that is abusing and harassing. So it just burns me up when people say things like that. And I think you were just such a great example of you did all the right things, you know all the right things, but this still happened to you. It's never a survivor's fault.
I mean, I have so many things to say already. First of all, to your old law partner guy, bastard, the guy that you text after bastard, obviously the guy that, don't mind all my swearing now, but obviously the guy that did that to you, monster bastard. I'm so frustrated. Like, you're an attorney, and if you had that hard of a time, that difficult of a time, going through the court system, I mean, what hope does that give to anybody else? Like, so unfair, so wrong. And then even to like the beginning, like I was raised to be like a nice girl, a kind girl. Yeah. Like, I know you were raised to be a nice, kind girl. Like, I'm afraid to say, but this world might not be a world meant for nice, kind girls anymore, because like your story could have been my story. Easy. Like, my parents growing up, they were like, no, who's ever coming, like if you're going on a date with someone, they're walking up to the front door to get you. They're not going to text you and you go running out to their car. They're going to come pick you up. And they even like wouldn't let me drive. If I was going on a date, they wanted the boy to come to the house. And I know it was so that they could meet them, but then that kind of set the precedence from there on out that if I went on a date, it was, the boy had to come to my home to pick me up and take me out. And I can just see how someone else would be like, oh, I want to meet your dog. I love dogs. And I'd be like, oh, okay, sure. I want a glass of water. I'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, this is your home. Can I have I can see how easy it would be for that exact scenario to play out with me.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a world for nice girls anymore. Like, as tragic as it is to say that, it is not. And like, I feel like I'm so grateful for you sharing your story, because first of all, I do understand 100% how terrifying it is, and all of the fears and worries that go with it. Like, how are people going to respond to me? Are they going to believe me? Are they going to blame me? And of course, there are always those idiots that do.
Right.
But then, like, is this going to affect my future? Is this going to affect my chances? Is this going to, like, those are very legitimate fears. So I just have to, like, stand in awe and admiration of you for being courageous enough to do that. But then also, I think of all of the other women out there and girls who will come across your story, and hopefully they will be put on their guard and recognize that, you know what, if this is someone you don't know, you don't have to let them come pick you up.
Right.
You don't have to give them a glass of water or let them meet your dog or into your home. Like, you don't need to do that. Like, I know we're raised to be kind, but saying no is perfectly fine.
And to heck with the manners. It's better for your safety
Absolutely.
than it is the things that we've been raised to do that are being polite, nice girls. Absolutely.
Well, and just to back that up, I mean, like it or no, there are physiological differences between men and women. I mean, even like a silly example, like, I have been training consistently for years now in running. And like it or no, my husband, who he loves soccer and plays just like with his friends once a week, he could still out sprint me every day of the week, and not just by a little bit, by a lot. And that's after like years of consistent training for me. Like, we're just different. And like, I mean, even in my own case, like, I couldn't outrun my captor. I couldn't outmuscle my captor. Like, I couldn't stop myself from being raped. Like, there's just physical differences that, whether we want to acknowledge them or not, they are there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen, a ton of the victim blaming, and I've kind of realized that I think a lot of it comes from people not wanting to accept the reality of how much rape is around you, or sexual assaults around you. It's a lot easier to think this world is safer than it is, because if I can look at Taryn and I can say, well, she did A, B, C, D wrong, and if I don't do those, I'm safe. That's an easier way to look at the world than to say, oh my gosh, this is all around me and I need to be aware. Because if you can look at and blame the victim of, like, they did these things wrong, I can avoid that, I know I won't do that. It's easier to look at the world that way, instead of saying, oh my gosh, all these people I know are being sexually assaulted. The world is a little bit scary. Utah is worse than the national average. It's a scarier place to live. So it's coming from a place of, like, I want to feel safer. So I'm going to look at the victim, analyze what they did wrong, and just say, I know I won't do that, and I'm safe. But that's not how it works, because sexual predators, which, by the way, the studies show that they actually are serial predators. And since I went public, 2 women have reached out to me that have been raped by my rapist. So there's more, it's been a year, and one of them, it was decades ago. So he's been doing this a long time, and I think it spans different states. I don't know for sure, but I think it's just so hard for people to accept that, these predators, they're going to use a different MO with each person. It's gonna be customized, right? For me, it was like, let me meet your dogs, because I talk about my dogs. With someone else, is going to be it's going to be a different manipulation. It's not going to be, let me meet your dogs if you don't have dogs. It's going to be your cat. It's going to be whatever, right? Like, and so that's part of the education, is you have to get people to accept that you have this false sense of safety. It's everywhere. And the second I came forward, I just could not believe how many people shared. These brave women that reached out and shared to me. They weren't comfortable sharing publicly, and I totally get it. And so that's part of why I feel like this strong, like, moral responsibility of, like, I need to make a change. I need to keep bugging people at the Capitol, and I have a cool project with the Salt Lake District Court, because of my experience, that I knew what was going on because I was an attorney. No other
Mm-hmm.
victim would. And so we're trying to make things
Yeah.
better. We have a kind of a pilot program we're working on. But I feel like I need to make it better because, like, people need to understand how bad it is. They need to be more aware,
Yeah.
or they're in big danger. And, that education component, I think, is really important, because I've come to realize, like, that victim blaming, I think it comes from a big piece of it is, like, they don't want to accept the danger that they're in. It's like, I want to see
Mm-hmm.
the world as a safer place. And so I'm going to blame the victim because it helps me keep this false belief that I'm safer than I am, because the world's scarier. And then I don't want to believe the world's that scary. And sadly, the world is that scary. And Utah is scarier than the national average. And that's not acceptable. And we need to change it.
As an attorney, what do you wish more victims knew?
Mhm.
First, I wish that the victims knew that there's resources, and, like, that they have resources available, that there is a huge community that believes you. I
Yeah.
I've had clients, female, male, that, are kind of embarrassed, they're afraid to come and get help, they're afraid to get a protective order. And I just think that knowing there's people that will believe you, and there are ways to keep you safe. But it is really hard. My experience with the criminal justice system, I have a really hard time looking at it. I know every experience isn't the same, and maybe Salt Lake County is different, but I'm like, how do I recommend this to someone? I was re-traumatized over and over and over again. I was basically, like, bugging them, like, to do their job, and I only could do that because I knew what they were supposed to be doing. So I'm like, it's so broken. Like, I don't know if I would, like, tell a victim, hey, go through this. Like, I'm struggling right now with, if someone asks me whether or not to do it, what do I say? I want people brought to justice. I want rapists convicted. But right now I'm like, is it even possible? I mean, I was told basically I needed to have, like, broken bones, and they would have gone to trial. So if somebody's, like, got broken bones, I would say, yeah, you got broken bones from your fighting back. But if somebody freezes in fright, I think I'd be like, I don't know, are you up for 3 to 5 years of this battle where that could end up with them only having, like, community service and private probation?
Which, I mean, freezing is the majority of what victims do is freezing, because you don't expect
It's a
to be raped.
physiological response. Yeah.
And it's not even a conscious thing. So you're right. It's not a justice system. That I don't think you got justice. I don't think I got justice. I mean, we just have a legal system, and I think you may be right, unfortunately.
And we've been talking about this so much, but I'm really curious your perspective, Taryn, being a part of that system, right? And like you said, you know more than so many of us because you are a part of that system. But we have discovered through all of our conversations with so many survivors that the criminal justice system is not necessarily what they would consider to be them getting justice. Just like you said, how can we recommend that when we've seen it not work out in survivor and victim's favor time and time again? So I am so curious, your perspective, what is another avenue, or what should our alternate routes to justice be for survivors? Because also, not only is the system broken, but justice means different things to different people. So what do you think? What's an alternative for survivors?
So my alternative, and I want to mention, we are working on Amy Hernandez is an amazing expert on the Violence Against Women Act that works in the 3rd District Court in Salt Lake. And we're trying to make it so that victims of sex crimes, that there'd be a separate calendar. Like, they have a separate calendar for domestic violence cases. So we're trying to work so there'd be a separate calendar, so that the Utah constitutional right of a speedy resolution for victims, would be, judges would be looking out for that, so that the cases wouldn't be lost, so that there'd be, like, bailiffs that are paying attention, because when I went to hearing, my rapist would turn and smirk at me, and I'm like, where's the bailiff? This can't happen. So we are working on
Yeah.
that, and a way for victims to have the kind of notification that I signed up for, that I knew how to because I'm an attorney. So we're trying to make it so that the system won't be so traumatizing. But again, that might not solve the problem that I ran into, where there's this sweetheart plea deal given, and that's what took away the justice, right? I didn't get to have the jury trial, that I wasn't able to tell my story to a jury and let the jury decide. So that's a problem. But the alternate options, that have helped me, is owning my story and going public. If anyone looks up this guy's names or aliases, there's a KSL story, there's my social media, and that's how I've connected with other survivors from the same rapist. So I've kind of created, it's not an official registry, but if somebody's looking up his name because they might go on a date with him, hopefully they'll see that. But the other source of justice, I've never put a huge emphasis on this, but for me now, I do have my civil lawsuit. And I know money's a big deal to him. Money is not a big deal to me in this. And, but I do have my civil lawsuit, and you really have to evaluate whether the person is someone that you can collect a judgment from. But most attorneys, and because it's a personal injury case, most attorneys are going to be doing a contingency fee. So you're a victim, one thing you're going to be worried about, I don't want to have to pay an attorney hourly rate, right? Because you might not be able to collect. But if it's a contingency basis, you pay, 30 or 40 or whatever percent you negotiate of what you recover to that attorney.
Yep.
And so you're not paying an attorney. You're only, going to pay if you recover. And if they own any assets, that can be a way to get something. And in my case, what I've always said is I'm going to pay myself back for all the medical. I'll get some restitution out of the criminal case. But medical adds up. Like I added up my ketamine treatment, which has been the most like a healing. I do it with my doctor that does it was an ER doctor. It's very important to have the right setting. We have integration therapy. Like you need to do it safely and in the right setting. But ketamine is expensive. Insurance doesn't pay for it. My ketamine has up to $12,000. I just added it up because we're going to try to get that at the restitution hearing that from have my advocate attorney in the criminal case try to get that ordered. But all of it adds up, and if you want the best resources to heal, some of them are expensive. And so in the civil case, I want to pay back like the medical, but I also look at it as, okay, now I'm going to have a fund that hopefully I can use to kind of compensate like for working less to do advocate work. And I can use that to work for my advocate work, because, right now when I like make signs and pass them out during, in April, the sexual assault awareness month, like my neighborhood, a lot of people had lawn signs and all these things I handed out. I'm like, be nice to have a fund that I just pull from instead of my personal funds. So, that to me will be justice. If I get money from him and then I can go and use that to raise awareness and do things, that to me is an alternate form of justice that I am pursuing. But at the end of the day, it's not the same. I know that he only spent like a weekend in jail when they arrested him, because then he got out on bail. And then he had an ankle monitor only for a month, so it's tough. You're like, the rest of your life, there's part of you that's going to be affected, but then it doesn't feel like he has anything the rest of his life. And, and that's hard, because it is not fair. Fairness is nothing the courts to ever do anything with. But justice, you would hope there'd be some consequences, like ban the guy from using dating websites, do something. And they don't do any of those things. And I think they could. I think they could do things to make it safer for other women, because there is no consequence, and he's got private probation. So he's paying these people, and all they do is write these like glowing reviews, like he's compliant. It's like, well, yeah, he's paying you. You're on his side.
Of course you're going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but yeah, I think the civil lawsuit option is good because again, you can recover for your medical, but you can get the pain and suffering, and then you can also go after punitive damages.
Yeah.
And so, but again, if it's somebody that doesn't have assets, not such a good option, because you'll have a judgment and you'll be like, yeah, I have this judgment, but you can't collect it on it. So it's difficult.
It is a little bit surprising to me too that like, I mean, I guess I'm not very familiar with the current dating apps, but there's also like, to me, there's like a little bit of a surprise because your story, like, it's unfortunately not unique. No, there's lots of other women and individuals who have been raped from like meeting on a dating app, meeting online. And part of me thinks like, couldn't these dating apps like put in something like when you're creating a profile that like does like background checks, which obviously like background checks aren't going to show everything, but like, I don't know, couldn't they like promote some safety features and I don't know,
Take reports. Yeah.
yeah, do something more. Like, I don't know, your phone has to, you show your face for it to open up. Like, does your face match your, like the picture you're putting on your profile match your, I don't know, what your phone recognizes. I don't know, something.
Yeah.
Well, I think you are just so courageous and brave and strong, especially pursuing these other avenues. You knew that the criminal justice system was not giving you the justice that you deserved from your rapist, right? So then you went and took all of these other routes to just cling to that for yourself, which I think is so amazing and showcases your strength. And I hope that what you're sharing with civil restitution, with these ideas of awareness, with posting, with getting his name on the internet so that it can help, like, not only is that achieving justice for you, but it's also such a beacon for other survivors or just other women. Like you said, what if they see him on another dating app and hopefully they look him up and now they can see all that you've done? Versus if none of that was out there, then other women would be prey for him to perpetrate on as well. So I think that that's amazing that you're kind of seizing that and creating these other opportunities. And I hope that for so many other people, they'll kind of hear that and be inspired to do the same thing, because we are right there with you. And I think we've got a lot of work to do to change what justice we can to create justice for so many survivors and victims that deserve it.
Yeah, and I would give just one caution about posting. I've been very careful to make sure what I post is accurate, because you do not want to give rise a claim of like defamation
Defamation or libel. Yeah.
So, I've made it clear, like he's pled guilty and things like that. So, because you don't want to say something because claiming someone's a rapist publicly online, if you don't want to get in a dispute of whether or not it's true, because that would be, defamation per se, because that would go to, his character and could make a person lose their job and everything. So, I was very careful to not say anything until after he pled guilty. And then, I've definitely complained publicly that like he pled guilty to this, but the charges were this. So, just, I want to make sure, like, no, I don't want anyone to hear, oh, she put his name publicly and stuff. But I've been very careful kind of in the way I've done so, because, I have the civil lawsuit. So, I don't want to make my civil attorneys mad, but you want to be careful that you're not, doing something that they could then sue you over, because that would be horrible to be sued by your rapist. So.
Well, we appreciate you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your story, being so open and vulnerable and kind
sharing
of
your expertise.
Absolutely. And everything that you've provided. I think our listeners this is just going to be a goldmine of information and ideas for them and inspiration, because you are so eloquently able to tell your story. And I think that's going to just inspire so many people. So we so appreciate your time and everything that you've shared with us today, Taryn.
No, thank you. It's an honor to
Incredible.
talk to you both. And yeah, thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Smart Talks. Thank you so much for joining us as we dive into these important conversations about creating a safer, more compassionate world. Remember, sexual violence affects so many, but together we can make a difference by raising awareness, supporting survivors, and advocating for change. If today's episode resonated with you, or if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this, please share it with them. Let's keep the conversation going because every voice matters. You can find more resources and ways to get involved on our website at elizabethsmartfoundation.org. And if you're able, consider making a donation to help us continue our work to end sexual violence and support survivors. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. And we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media. You'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. Leave us a review from wherever you're listening. Your feedback helps us to improve and reach even more people. Thanks again for being here, and until next time, remember that each voice can spark change, and together we can make the world a safer place for everyone.